Howdy, folks. Ryan Dunford here with Team Lucy Racing and Horizon. Um, Today we're going to continue our build of the 8X 2.0. This video is going to be bag F and bag G. So it'll be kind of for the nitro car, the center, diff, brakes, all that fun jazz, initial build. And then what looks like the beginning of the center chassis section, so side guards and electronics tray, things like that. So we'll try to bang through this, try to share anything I can with you guys as we go along. But again, this will be recorded and kept on YouTube. But let's go ahead and get started. This is the 8XE2 bag F. You can see I kind of already cut it open. Somebody needed some parts, so at the time this was the only place I had to get them from. So I kind of already had cut it open, and then you'll see I replaced the parts in here. But normally I'd cut off the top here, dump out the contents, and then this becomes my bag to build, as I'm going along. I'm going to set that off to the side here, and I'll tell you why in a minute. But you're going to see got a bunch of different things kind of in here. These are some brake rotors. Somebody needed some, and these are the updated cams that I shoved in here with them so that I didn't lose them. And then I need the brake pads out of here because I gave all those away. When the guys need stuff, it kind of comes from my stuff, and that's just how it works. I don't need any of these because this has all of that in there, and should be good to go. I like to keep those rubber bands, and you'll see why later. But basically, this is the center section. Bag F1, bag F2, we'll set to the side. This is all the plastics here. Hopefully everybody's having a good day. If you have questions, comments, anything you want to know, make sure to throw it in the comments there. So basically what I do, every time I cut open a bag, I take it and then I put it into here. The reason for that is sometimes when you cut open bags, something can kind of get stuck in the bag or stuck behind one of these stickers or whatnot. And if you didn't see it and you threw it in your trash can, your big trash can, well, then you got to go fishing in your trash can if you're missing something. This way, all I have to do is go fishing in this one clear plastic bag looking for stuff. But I'm also going to cut open this bag since I know that it's going to be needed as well. And we'll dump all this out. And again, this is going to go right into this plastic bag. Let's go ahead and get all this stuff out here. All the wonderful new diff parts. This is a new diff setup for the 2.0. It's just lighter, more rigid, more cost effective, all kinds of stuff. So we'll talk a little bit about some of the different options we have. But then here's, again, I always set everything out. I got my 4 springs. Here's an interesting new thing we put in here, an angled ball cup for your throttle pull. So depending on the engine that you use and the height of the carburetor and the height of your servo and the way you set all your ball linkage up, this just gives you another option to make sure that link pull is nice and straight. But we do still include the other ball as well, and you'll see that in the other bag here. But again, take this, put it in here, and then I will go about also setting out all my screws here. Now, this is the first bag that you kind of get into the separation between the nitro and the electric car. For some folks, that causes a bit of confusion. Some folks it doesn't, and that's okay. And basically the way that works is we build the center section of both the nitro and the electric car in the same bag grouping. even though all the parts might not be, you know, in the same bag at that point. So just something to note. There's one of those. Let's go with that, and a couple little tiny set screws. Okay, so everything's laid out here. I'll go ahead and start following along with the instructions and talking about some of this stuff as we go along, just so that you guys know. So the very first step is having us insert one of the brake loops into the brake cam, and the first cam is this cam. They're noticeably different. You can see you've got two very different cams here, so it's pretty hard to muck these up, but basically I usually like to take and get this set screw started in here, and I'll kind of go down until, I mean, it goes in there quite a ways because it's got to get all the way down to that hole, right? So I'll kind of get it down there, and there we go. Now we can start to see it. I'll back it out until I can't see it anymore. And so I take it, I put it in place here. We used to include like measurements for this backside here. This one we include, you can see it says that it's supposed to be at about a 5 millimeter. So some things that are important is when you're setting this up, so the 5 millimeters is going to be this side back here, but this is never cut perfect. So does that measurement need to be perfect? Not really. The whole point of the measurements, so this is the top and there's this window here. So what you really want to strive for is just getting the center of both keyholes right in the middle of this window, right? So that they're kind of, both the wires are pulling right through this center section here. So you kind of get the first one set up. You know, I will measure it to make sure. Pair of calipers. I'm going to take, and you're going to see here, I'm just going to push down, and it stops. And that's 4.68. I'll move it in a skosh, and then I'm just going to leave it. One thing you do want to make sure that you do is that this loop is straight up and down with the axis of your brake cam. That way when it's pulling it nice and good. And now that it's close, I'm going to tighten that, because this one I usually just leave, and then I monkey with the upper one. So that's the first step. Some people put thread lock in here down this hole with the set screw. If you manage to strip this set screw, you're basically never going to get this apart. Not the end of the world, but I've never used thread lock there. If it were like the main at a Worlds, I probably would. You know, but most of the time it's a flat ended, so I'm just going to get on it pretty decent. And this being steel, they kind of go together anyway. Let's see here. Brent, at the end, I'll try to show you that part, because right now I'm building the nitro car, but that doesn't mean that I can't answer questions along the way of the electric car. So what you're going to see in the manual, just so that people understand, like over here, there's a step F1 and another step F1. Well, the F1N is for nitro, step F1E, that's for the electric. So if you're building the nitro car, you follow along with the N's, and if you're building the electric car, you follow along with the E's. What you're going to notice is when you follow along with the E's, these aren't all the parts you need. So if you're going to build the electric car, that's what this bag K is for. So you're basically going to open this bag, set this off to the side, and start using parts out of this. You're going to use some of the screws here, but some extra screws will be in here. So you'll just be looking primarily through this bag. And for those of you building one or the other, if you're never going to run the other version, you can sell off the parts, or you can just give them to a buddy. So The next part will be to get everything set up through this upper portion. Now these fit in here really good. Nothing going on too crazy here. The pull should always be right in this area, right? You shouldn't be getting in or out of this. You can see it actually hits if you end up pulling past it or getting too far ahead of it. So if you're not setting your brake gap and everything right, I mean, that's a lot of movement for a pull. So it shouldn't be a problem, but it should be good. The other thing I like to do is this part. I take, there it is. I take a hole reamer or body reamer, and I just lightly hit both of these. Again, it's just lightly, make sure it's nice and straight, inside and out. And I just do that because I like those edges just radiused a tiny bit. That way everything's got a little less of a chance of sticking or anything like that. You don't have to do it. And then this goes up through this hole here, okay? And then this E-clip goes on here. So this E-clip, if it were to like fall off or something, it doesn't really matter after the assembly is together. So you'll notice some people don't have the E-clip on their car, and usually it's just because it looks a little bit cleaner without it. I put it on there. The sole purpose of this E-clip is this, that all stays together when you pull it apart. So not that you really do that very often. Normally this part's attached to at least the uppers, and it's not going to go anywhere anyway, but that's the sole purpose of that E-clip, is just for this assembly step. Okay, then I'm going to take my front brake cam, and this one doesn't have to thread quite as far. Woo, swing and a miss. And we'll get that going in there. Okay, so now this one, we're kind of already here, but I just want to kind of show you. Let me use this. So you'll see, if I look at this and I look at the center of that keyhole right now when it's centered, you can see that it's pretty close to center. Basically what I want to do is I want to put this part in. And the reason we don't give both measurements is because you really just want to get these two in line with one another, so that when you put the wrench in there and you look at it, it's in the same line. So this one I'm going to put in, okay? And you want to make sure that when you're putting this in, if you look at the way the cams are, see how this one's pointing down right now? You want to take this one and point it down as well. And that's the direction. You can also look in the instructions, but that's the direction you're going to put this key in. I'm going to kind of just get it semi-close and tighten it up enough to hold it in place. And then what I'm going to do is adjust these until I feel like the centers of the keyholes are basically in line. Actually going to pull the rear brake down. Check that. Now that one's centered. And straight up and down. Some of this might take a couple goes, guys, until you get it all right. Okay, so that one's good. So you can see I moved everything over. If you look at these two keys, they're pretty close to that loop at the top being in line. Okay, so that's where I'm going to go ahead and tighten this now. And I can tell you, like, I moved my rear brake a little bit to get centered, so that ended up being, for me, 3.24 to get it to the center. And then my front, I don't know if I can Might be able to do it this way. So my front ended up only at 0.93, so basically a millimeter. So 4 millimeters and 1 millimeter is basically where I ended up to get both of mine looking like they're in line with one another. Okay, so that's that step. That is step F2N. I'm gonna go over here to F3N. So F3N is going to be basically putting both uppers, attaching those to this here, to this portion. That uses two M2.5 by 10s. It uses these two little screws. So I'm going to put these on 4 on high on my Hitachi here, which is now known as a Metabo HPT 3.6 volt. So these, again, I want to make sure that my brake cams are both pointing, you know, basically both my, you don't want to accidentally put it on and this is like out like this, or this one's out like this, right? So you want to put both the bottoms on when these are like this. All right, so you've got so in the manual, they have it this direction, and then there's basically the section, the parts with these two little nubs are what go up into here, right? So this side too has these two little nubs, and those will go up. And then the other thing you want to look at is, if you can see there, you'll see one side looks like this. That's for a bearing flange to fit right in. So it's nice and squared off. That's the side you want towards the differential, because that's where the bearing sits. And then this side's this smooth radius, right? So just make sure you look at the instructions carefully here. So you got this, and then if you look at these from the top down, right? Both of these are kind of flat to one another, and this one's kind of offset, right? So just the manual shows all this stuff, but I just want to point it out because I've seen people actually not quite get this right. So I'm going to take this, nubs towards the top, and then bearing boss towards the inside, right? So I'm going to fit this little nub here into the plastic on the bottom, and there's that side, and then I'm going to put this one screw in. And it does not drive it in all the way, and that's okay. So I'll finish with my wrench, and I'm just getting this snug. I want to make sure there's some movement up and down still, and then my brake cam spins well still for me. Okay, and now I'll do the other side. So again, bearing boss towards the center. And again, these pretty much can only go on one way. I need more light. And there's no need to crank down on these screws so much. I mean, all these little screws are doing is holding this assembly together for you for when you, I mean, these screws could be loose and wiggly, because ultimately what's going to hold all this together is going to be these 4 main screws anyway, right? So now you can see that's all together, so nothing's going to fall apart or fall off. And I'm going to check this side. Yeah, still moves up and down a little bit. There we go. Now it moves up plenty. And that's what I want to feel. It's really easy to tighten these down too much, guys. So that is step F3N. So F4N is going to be putting the brakes on. All right, so the brakes, guys, something I want to point out. If you look at the brakes, all right, let me do, yeah, okay. So this side you can see is like a regular hole. This side is oblong, right? So what you want to do is when you're putting two of these together, right, you want to make sure the oblong hole and the circle hole are the same on both sides. So you can see this is wrong, right? So if I put these together with the brake pads in the middle, that's wrong. So I want to find the other one that's the opposite side to match up. So now brake pads are together. Both of those sides are circles and they look the same. Okay, so these are the opposite pads. So that's one set. And then this is another set. And this is exactly what I was going to tell people about. So something if you get something that's off, now these were ordered out of stock, you'll now notice my other set is not quite right. So, excuse me one second, I'm going to run out and grab a pad. Sorry guys, you probably can still hear me because you're actually in my ear. But hey, now you know we're live, right? So it doesn't really matter which other one I grab. It just matters that I grab another one. So grabbed another one. And this one can go off to the side. So now I've got two matching sets. So sorry about that, guys. But it's important that they're matching. And then the other thing of note is if we're holding this direction, if you look at the instructions, there's a specific side you put the oval hole and a specific side you put the circle hole. And if you look at the brake cam, basically the way that it's pushing, right? The side that is the pivot side, so this side here is going to be your circle. The side you're pushing on, this side here, is going to be your oval. So that's the easiest way to always tell. And here's how I do this. So this does have new brake screws. So you're just going to grab these like this. I go, and here's how I start them. So I put the first one in, put the spring, and then the other one, and these are the straight holes, okay? So those go on this side, and I just get that started, make sure that it's nice and straight. Yep, so I check it this way and make sure it's nice and straight in there. And I'm gonna grab my Hitachi on 5. Doesn't really matter, I'm not gonna tighten this down all the way, so I'm just getting it started. Okay, so I'm just getting that most of the way in. Now I will take the other side. So if I go in here and I get this strong enough to kind of hold these like so, then usually I can kind of tuck the spring in between these like so, right? And it'll stay there. So now I just take the other brake cam screw and go through those two holes. And again, we'll put it in there. Make sure it gets started nice and straight. That way, that way. Okay. So these, you're more or less using all the threads. Okay. But there's a measurement here that you can use that we probably should have been in the manual. But you can see now I have this in. You can see this, right? Sorry if it's this way, is the correct way. And you can see, oh, it just pushes on there and it just pops back itself. That's how it should be. So now we're going to take our calipers, and there's two measurements. One measurement, you can measure to the outsides, right? So like to the outsides of the plates, which is really hard because you want to do it near the screws. So I can't really get calipers in anywhere there. But I can get the inside ones in like right here, right? That inside measurement should be 4.5 millimeters. So from plate to plate should be 4.5. So right now I'm at over 5. So I'm gonna turn that in a whole turn. I know the other side looks a lot wider, so I'm just gonna do that at the same time. So now I'm at 4.46 on one, 4.30 on one. So I'm just gonna crack one, 4.50, 4.43. So we'll just crack that one again. All right, so there you go. That is basically how you put brakes together. Again, measuring in between here and here. You can see, get in there, we're at 4.5. Pretty close to it. I mean, it's not perfect. So again, I'm going to do the same thing on this side. I'm going to take, so this one will be over here. So that means this is the circle side, which means I take this, that goes on, that goes on, that goes on. So you can see, again, it's just kind of one setup. And the circle goes over here. So that's crooked, so let's straighten that out. Okay, so that's good and straight now. I'm gonna make sure that's the right direction. And let's go ahead and get this in there pretty good. Okay, so now this side again gets nice and taut. I can now get that spring down in there. It kind of holds it all together for me while I'm, see how it kind of holds it together now. I don't have to try to line everything up without that. Put the screw through the holes, hold it in place. And for a lot of nitro guys, this is one of the brakes and the throttle assembly is like the hardest thing. The other thing of note, this material for the center diff is it's got a lot of glass in it. So it's pretty hard. You could put like grease in the holes if it's too hard or whatnot. So we're going to go ahead and start measuring here. 4.6, so not too far off. 4.5 on that side. So, and guys, it helps to have a good pair of calipers. You want to make sure, again, you're not getting on one of the spring coils. You're just going between the two plates. So there we go. I now have two brakes. They both pull and spring back really good. You know, kind of go from there. So there's that step. That's step F4N. So now it's F5N. So that goes off to the side. And now we need all of these because we're going to put, these are your brake guides. Okay. And these go on. Obviously, you can see one side has spot for your the countersunk heads, your flathead screws. So obviously this is going to go through that way. And then on this side, if you look in the manual, you can't really make it out. But if you look at the brake rotor guide, one is thinner and one is thicker. The thicker section is what always goes towards the, in this case, like this. So I have the thick side towards this, right? So this, we're going to start one. Ow. So again, start one, and then I can thread one. And then I will go back with my hand tool, and that's on 5. Again, this center diff stuff, it's pretty darn hard. So again, same thing on this side, thick, thin, thick in towards the plastic here. Let's see, again, guys, if you have any questions, feel free to fire them away as I'm wrenching here. I know, if you're building along, it's obviously it's more fun for you, but some of you are just watching for the first time. We're getting ready to build one, so if you have built it already, hopefully the build went okay for you. Or if you're just looking for some tips and tricks, feel free to ask away. So that's your brake rotor guide. So basically those are meant so that when this is in here, it doesn't like walk around a bunch and whatnot. Obviously it can't just fall out of place because it's between the brake discs, but it just keeps your brakes smoother. Vinny, how often do I replace my brake pads? Strangely enough, I actually replace the rotors more often. I find that if my brakes are like doing something weird and I replace the pads, it's okay for a minute. But if I replace the rotors, it's like putting new brakes in for me. So the big thing is that I'm resetting that gap, because obviously with our cars, they're really high revving. These will work themselves out a tiny, I mean, they shouldn't. This stuff's hard as heck, but they seem to. So I always make sure I go in and recheck my brake gap. I mean, sometimes it doesn't hurt. Okay, so between my brake pads is 2.14 right now, right? Between the actual pads. And then this is 2.06. So you can see you want like a 0.05 to 0.1 gap there. So if your pads themselves start to wear down, you can always just remeasure that, get it back to around 2.1, 2.14, and put some new rotors in and usually be good to go. So there is, I think that's it for 5. Yep, that's it for 5. So now we're going to actually put the center diff into the center diff holder, which means we're going to put the rotors on. So these come with a bunch of oil and stuff on them. So you always want to take some good like motor spray or whatnot. This is Nitro Force by Dynamite, and make sure to clean them off, guys. Doesn't take a lot. I mean, you can feel them after. Like if you feel the difference between the two, this one's like sticky and that one's now nice and smooth. But just get that off. Otherwise, what happens is the first couple times you use your brakes, that crud gets pushed right into the brake pads, and then your brakes start to grab really weird. So now we're just going to put all this together, and that is going to take 4 different screws. So there's 3 that are one size and 1 that's a different size, guys. So this is something to be conscientious of, and I'll show you. So if you look back here, it's this side. This one back here, the reason it's shorter is you can see the holes there, and it goes down into this shallow section. That's so that there's clearance for the engine, because the gear ratios we run, we get pretty close. So the screw can only thread down to like here. So that this one screw, which is this, when you'd be looking at the car, usually you're looking at it opposite the exhaust side. It's your back left. So it'd be this screw, the screw above the E-clip or closest to the E-clip, is going to be the smaller size. So there's a couple different ways. Usually I'm going to take, let's see here, let's go this way. And then diff goes in. So the easiest way to know on this, the gear will always go towards this nub, right? So essentially it goes in like so, but I got to put the brake discs on here first. So I'm just going to throw the brake discs on here. Ooh, it's a good set, nice and tight. So put both of those on. Oops, shouldn't have even set it down there yet, but it's on and snug. So, and that's the other thing that happens on the brake discs over time is the center of them wears out, so they can kind of do this and walk on you. So it's really good to okay, so there's that. Turn this back over. This goes this way. This one will go on this side. And so I'm going to kind of hold all this like that, and I'm going to put these first two screws in. So again, this shorter one pushes down through there. This longer one goes up here. All three of these size, they're all the same size. So again, this material is kind of hard. So you got a couple options. You can just kind of work at it a little bit. But this is, again, this is on the same setting. It's still on 5. It's not going to be nearly enough. I'm going to actually turn it back to low and turn it up to 8. And it's just so that I can use the driver to drive it most of the rest of the way. Okay, you can see I didn't drive it all the way there. There's still about a thumbnail. There's still a little gap there. And then this side is already pretty close. So there's a little gap there. So I'm going to leave that for now while I put this other side in place. Okay. And again, you want to make sure you get the bottom of the rotor into the rotor guide, all this fun stuff. And this is still on the same thing, so I'm just going to get one side started. And then I'll drive this one most of the way in, most of the way in. Okay, before I forget, because I do that, I'm going to take this, I'm going to turn it right back down to 5. That way, when I go to put in my next screw, it won't be a problem. So now I'm going to push my diff one way, and I'm going to push my diff the other way. And you only have to do this because it's off of the car right now. So I'm basically seating each bearing. And then I can kind of finalize snugging all of this. And again, I'm just snugging these down. I'm not Herculean them in or anything like that. So now I'm going to push this direction with the diff. Tighten these. Tighten this one. All right. So now these should still be super free. Both of those. There's up and down play, which means I didn't crush the crud out of those. This spins pretty freely. The brakes will break in pretty good. I mean, you don't usually want to increase that gap much because you don't want to have to pull on them much to use the brakes. So you can see as I hold the brake, it stops really good right now. Right? So all that mechanism is working really well. We should be pretty good there. So that is F6N as in Nancy. Now it has us put our air filter hanger on. This goes on with this 1 and 3 screw. This is where I tend to, oops, I'm gonna go back on high. I always start it and then I can just pull it around like that. Let it kind of hang out and okay, I'll straighten this up. Again, depending on your engine, your air filter might point in slightly different ways. So you can kind of, we left it a little open so you could point this whichever way you needed to. We're gonna tighten that up. And then we're gonna put the servo in. All right, so I have been running the Spectrum 6280 in the throttle brake position for a long time. It's more torque, it's a little bit slower, and I find that for my finger movement, I could run that at about 96 to 100% and it all felt normal to me. But because it had the extra torque, it just lasted a lot longer for me. I'm actually going to try this 6250, which has about the same amount of torque, a little, well, no, it's got a little less torque than the 6280, but it's actually got more torque than the 6290. But you can see it's a half-size servo. So let me show you what, like, our 6280 is this size. So our 6280 is this size of a servo, right? And I'm curious to try it. Some people have asked me to try it. I just hadn't yet, but I mean, it might as well, right? It saves like 15 grams, I think. So I'm just curious, see how it works and see how it goes. It costs a little less money, which I like for customers. And then the other thing about it is we have two options to mounting a servo. So the servo never goes directly down here. Woo! It never goes directly on it like that. Okay. No matter what, you're going to use one of two options: either the spacer or the spacer that happens to be a switch mount. So this is for mounting an electronic switch. It's this. Our version of it is DYNR0100, but honestly, there's a bunch of people that make this switch. And so that's why I kind of chose that one to use. So DYNR, it's this normal, I think ProTech makes one, a bunch of people make one. So I'm going to use this because I want to use that switch. And then, so that goes, so I basically have the servo in there, right? Sorry, servo goes this way. Servo goes with like the splines lining up there. And then this goes in between. So I'm going to kind of push it up a little bit, slide this in, push that down. And then it has you use these screws with these washers. One of the guys turned me on to these other screws. They're actually for our axial line of product. But you can see it's still an M3 screw, but it's got this really flat like pan head to it, which is essentially mimics this, but then it uses a 2mm, so then it matches everything else. So I'm going to try them because, again, I was asked to try them. I'm going to try them. I don't know, you know how I am with, I'm just curious about things, so I'll try them if they work great, but let's see here. They probably don't even measure. Well, they actually do measure one. All right, they're whopping 0.2 grams savings. I don't really care about that, but like I said, I'm just curious how it'll look, curious if it'll work right, you know, that kind of thing. See if I like the look of it. But I'll get all four of these started. All right, so all those are started. So now again, my wrench, my Hitachi here is on the same number. It's on high on 5. So I'll just tighten all of these. All right, and then I will go back in and hand tighten. And I get on these pretty decent. I don't want my servo to move, that's for sure. Yeah, but there we go. So that's what they kind of look like. I don't know, pretty darn clean looking. Why not, right? So sometimes you put something on and people are like, wow, where'd you get those? I'm like, they're just screws. Well, they're pretty cool looking. And I saw them, and honestly, when I saw them, I went, wow, look at that. So maybe other people will too. So I'm actually going to install the switch as well. That's what these three little screws are, little button heads are used for. It does not come with the switch, guys. You kind of have to buy the switch if this is the switch that you want. Your call. And if you don't want it, arg, go in the hole. There it goes. There's a lot of different switches out there. We still have the switch holder for the mechanical switch in the box. But if you're using this switch or a different switch or a direct lead or however you do all that, which is fine, as long as you're getting power to you the way you want. We do also include a cover to fill in that plug on the back. But so you can see what that looks like. It's a pretty clean setup. And then obviously one end goes to your battery box and the other end goes to your receiver box. So your choice which one to use. And then F9N, let's see, are there any questions here? How often do you replace? Okay, nice tip with cleaning the brake disc off, just taking it all apart now. Well, I don't know if you need to take it all apart. We've all done that from time to time, but yeah. So anyway, now we open the next bag. So this I'm going to kind of set off to the side for right this second. This is the problem. I've got stuff everywhere, guys. Sorry about that. I need to talk faster because we're supposed to be further along by now. This part doesn't take too long, but for some reason scares a lot of people. So set all these up here, that up there. Again, I'm going to take this, I'm going to stick it in this bag, I'm going to cut all this out, and we're going to go like this. So now I've got all this stuff everywhere. There's two different rods here. Two of these are the same, and this one's different. Springs, collars, all kinds of stuff. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to put some set screws in some of these different items so that I don't lose them, and so they're ready to use. And I just like to get it out of the way. Again, you won't see me putting thread lock in any of these because it's so small that if you do, when you go to try to take them out, you will break them or break your wrench usually, which is very frustrating, even though, I mean, we get way more than our money's worth out of all these wrenches, in my opinion. These are MIP wrenches. Used to be Thorpe way back in the day for the old folks here. There's two different sizes of screws here, you can see. This big screw is actually for your servo horn. Again, I'm going to put all these in here to get them out of the way. Okay, and then there's four little itty bitty washers. These are actually two little tiny bearings, and then these I don't need now because I used the other. So those I can set to the side. So now you'll see here's the standard ball cup, and then your offset ball cup. So kind of, I would play with both, see which one you like, that kind of thing. So now we're going to start assembling stuff. I find for me, I always kind of have to look between these over here and the way they all go together here. Myself, I mean, I've put this together enough times now that it's not as big a deal. But I'm going to take one of the short rods. First thing it does is have me put one of these red things on. Now there's threads on the end of this rod. So this actually goes past the threads, basically line it up almost at the end of the threads, and then tighten that in place, right? So I've got it basically almost all the way up to the threads. And then this gets this funky offset jibber jabber. Now, if you have these dynamite shock tools or something like it, this very, very top one is so small you don't realize you can use it, but that is what this is for, right? So that now I have something, instead of having to grab it with pliers, I can take and I can just thread this right on there, right? Holding it, threading it, no big deal. Now you want to thread it until the end just barely comes out of here, because this is essentially your brake adjustment. All right, so there we go. A little bit more. You can see just barely peeking out of there. That's your top rod. The next rod is the long rod, okay? And there's thread in the middle of this, and then it's flat on the end. So I don't know if you can see that. Oh, there you go. So there's thread in the middle there. Okay, so now this one gets, all right, so one of these slides around. That's not the right one, right? One of these threads on, which is what you need, okay? So here's the one that threads on, right? Or one's like wider and one's narrower. And this is where I always have to look between the different ones, right? So in this case, this is going to be the narrower one, which is this one, right? But then you also want to make sure that you get it on the rod properly. So this is where I'll always look down to step F10, and you can see that the rod goes like this, and then one side of this is flat, the other side's got this boss on it, right? So if you look in step F10, you can see that it goes like this, and this boss needs to be on this side of the wire and up, right? So if you look in F10, it goes like this, right? The boss is on this side and it's up. So that's how that works. So I'll go ahead and take that. And then this you thread to the middle of the threads so that you have the equal amount of thread showing on both sides. If you can still see those. Sucks getting older, guys. But I usually just take my finger and run it along and kind of, oh, there we go. That's pretty close. So now you can see this is what this looks like. It's like that. There's the boss. That's what you want it to look like, guys. Okay. And then the other little red adjuster goes on the end of that. And what you usually do, and again, this doesn't need to be perfect either, is you usually just put it flush with the wire, right? So you've got a little bit of adjustment room there, and there you go. So that's the middle one. And then, so these are your two brake ones. And then now it's having you build the throttle one. Okay, so the throttle one, first thing you do is put the end on. I'm going to use the offset end. For me, that's worked the best on this car. And this, you want to get it on there enough so it's not going to come off. Basically, that's the whole purpose of this one. So you thread it, okay, and then I thread it till it's like a lot harder to thread. Otherwise, if you keep going, you're just going to run it right out this end, and it's not going to work right. But you'll see there's actually a tiny bit of threads left there. So just so you know, in case you're looking at it, you should be showing a tiny bit of threads if you're using this rod end. Actually, if you're using either rod end. And then, all right, so some carburetors, the essentially where the pool is further back. Some are further in. OS engines are a little further out. Some other engines are a little further in. If you've got one of the ones that's a little further in, that's what this extra collet is for. If you're running any of the OS stuff, it's just the spring. So you'll have an extra one of these little collets and set screws, okay? And this is how it's built in the manual. So you got that, right? Rod end. And now again, same thing. One side has a boss, one side doesn't. So if I've got it all facing this way, I want the boss up. Okay, so I want the boss up and this, the triangle in. So like this. Boss up, triangle in or down. That's how you want that. And again, I kind of cheat and I look down at step F10N and see how that's supposed to be. And you'll see basically what happens is this goes up and rides against the bearing race. So that's what that's about. And then you put one of these collars on the end, which I put the set screw in too far on. Hi, little fly. And this isn't, you're not doing anything special with this. So just snug it in place because you are definitely going to adjust this, you know, when you get everything together. Mike Marshall, when will kits be back in stock? It depends. California, they may have hit stock today. So today or tomorrow. Illinois is supposed to be either Friday or Monday. So I checked the ones to California today, so I know they'll be in stock shortly. Anyway, that's step F9N. Step F9N is getting these three rods together like that. Okay. F10N is now getting it all on the throttle servo horn. This is the stock servo horn for the throttle. It actually works really well. You pick whatever one of these fits your servo and stick it on there and use that. For the throttle, it works pretty good. It can flex under braking a little bit at times, which is why people prefer the aluminum one. So I'm going to use the aluminum one, which is a clamping style, so that I don't lose this little screw. I'm going to stick it in here for now. Not hard, just stopping it. And that is TLR 341015. If you're using a 23 tooth, like a Spectrum servo. If not, you want the one for the 25 tooth, and it's either 016 or 014. Pretty sure it's 016, the next number up. But anyway, so we're going to do step F10N with our aluminum servo horn. And so on this, it's important to be cognizant there's a short side and a long side, just like on the stock one. I mean, they look identical, right? So all these parts can go away. I like to get rid of parts because otherwise I get done and I'm like, oh, I got stuff left. So the short side is your brake side. The long side is your throttle side. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'll put together my brake side. So I've got my brakes. So I'm going to take the longer of these two screws. Okay. It goes, and then I've got what is a metal washer, this upper weird looking one, right? So I've got a metal washer, goes through this. Right? Pushes right through there. Okay, so I got a metal washer, screw through there. Okay, now goes through the short side. And when I say pushes through there, you want the kink to be down because it keeps it out of the way. So I put my bearing in place, and then this is going to come through that bearing hole. Okay, and then it goes to this bottom one with that little boss up. So it's basically facing the outside, and it's going to go right into that hole. Takes a 2mm. Get it. Oh, all right. So for me, it's just easier to do it like this. As long as the boss is facing up, it's all going to work out. It's in the small side. Just make sure. Okay, yep, looks like the correct step. And now I'm going to tighten the screw. Now, you kind of snug it up, right? If you snug it up, see how these two kind of stay together? I don't like it like that because my brakes might not be perfectly aligned. So I'll just back this off. Until it's kind of tighten that hole for right now, but you can see now it kind of separates the two. So you back it off a tiny bit. Now this one can be separate from that one. It's just one of those little things I've always done. So that's the brake side. The throttle side, I'm going to get the screw on the wrench. Okay, so the throttle side gets a metal washer, the little plastic washer, and it's got a flat side and a dome side. The flat side goes towards the washer, so the dome goes away from it. Okay, and then you've got the bearing, and that goes through the top of this. And then this is the same thing on this side. You're going to put the boss towards the bearing. The boss is what takes up all that gap and everything. So now we've got that in there. And this, right, and it's a bearing, so it moves around. Now, if it's super tight, it barely moves in and out a little bit. I'll usually loosen it a tiny bit so it's got some decent wiggle room because I just want it all to be smooth and consistent for me. So that's what it should more or less look like when it's all said and done. Yeah, right. So when you look at it from the manual view, this is exactly what it looks like. Okay, F10N. We'll come over here. Or sorry, F11N, I guess I should say. I get the center diff back. And this, what I do is I always just take it and I set it like this. Put these two in like that. The first thing I do is take and I feed these through both holes. And so that just kind of sets in there, right? So those are through the two holes, if you can see. Okay, and then you get a little plastic dome washer, plastic dome in. If I can, there we go. So I'm going to do the same thing to the bottom. Okay, a little piece of fuel tubing, a little piece of fuel tubing on the other one. Metal washer goes on both. Pretty sure I got cat hair in all this. And then collars. And these you need to be able to get to, and you don't want to make them perfectly tight quite yet. So basically, I haven't really put the servo horn on yet, but I'm going to straighten the servo horn because that's where I always set my linkage up to start, right? So my servo horn's on there. Actually, before I forget, I'm going to pull that off. I'm going to put a tiny bit of black grease on these splines. I don't know. I saw it online that it makes it easy to get this on, easier to get this on and off. And I'm just going to kind of spread it around the outside. I don't want to get the grease in the hole because I'm actually going to put thread lock in there when I do my final setup. Not right now. You guys won't see me do it right now. But just a little black grease, not a lot. That's what I was told to try. So I'm going to try it. Makes it so you can get that horn off a little bit easier. So anyway, wipe off the top and put that right back on there. Push it down. So now I can, you can see I've got a little bit of play. Maybe if I can get it here. See how I got a little bit of play there? I'm going to move this collar so it just takes up that play. So basically it's up here. Okay. So I'm going to more or less take it and just apply a very, very tiny bit of pressure there so that it, okay. So now, oh, there's no play. All right. So I'm going to actually tighten this pretty decent because that should be close. You know, I might have to adjust it in, but then on the rear, you can see there's the same thing. So see how there's a gap there? So I'm basically going to take the collar and I'm going to take up that gap. So that's why you don't see like measurements for where all this goes in the manual either, because depending on how much you thread it in this way or that way. So now there's basically no gap in either of those. They don't flop around or nothing. And my throttle horn is centered. So that's all set. For now, I'm going to take and I'm going to put this screw in place. I'm not going to actually screw it in even most of the way. I just don't want to lose it. And there we go. That's my center diff assembly, guys. My brakes are mostly set up already. There will be a set time when I show you that part, but that's your whole center setup. So I do always take a little bit of time on this with folks and make sure, right? So we got everything spinning good still. So that's my center diff, which leads me to bag G, which is the center. I actually get to touch the chassis finally. So this is the chassis. It's the same chassis for both the nitro and electric car, obviously. I always get excited at this step. So now I can finally I had everything I needed. I can take and throw away the bags from the previous step. The chassis is the only thing in that bag, so as long as the chassis came out, I'm good. And so I'm going to open bag G. We're also going to set the chassis over here for now. So here's my bag G. I'm going to take this again. This is my trash bag. It's going to go off to the side here. And you don't see a ton of stuff here, right? But that's what we got. So bag G1. Cut this open, empty this. Hopefully everybody's having a good night. Not a ton of viewers on this live, not usually. That's pretty normal. Most everybody watches it as they're building in the future or after the fact. Okay, so see, that's a perfect example. I just dumped that bag out and look at all the stuff still stuck in there from all the machining oil and everything, right? So if I would have thrown that in the trash, I'd have been pretty mad having to go dig it up out of the trash. But anyway, there's that. So again, let me get all these screws situated. I do this because it just makes the rest of it go a bit faster for me. At least that's the way it feels like. Remove all this crud. Fuel line, cap head screws, button heads, all kinds of fun stuff. The other thing I will say while I'm sorting all these is in my previous videos I talked about, normally I build with aluminum screws or aluminum nuts, definitely not aluminum screws in 8 scale. And I would go back and replace them once I got them. Well, I did get them. And so I replaced them. I ended up between just the front and rear clip alone, I replaced 16 screws or 16 nuts, sorry. Oops. Replaced 16 nuts. Okay. And in replacing those 16 nuts, I weighed the steel ones and the aluminum ones I replaced them with. And just between 16 nuts, it was kind of crazy. I didn't think it'd be that much, but it was. These are the same size. It ended up 16 nuts by themselves, 16 flange nuts weigh 11.3 grams. I was like, wow, that seems like quite a bit for some nuts. And 16 aluminum nuts, flanged nuts by themselves only weigh 3.9 grams. So it seems silly that we do some of this stuff sometimes, but in case you don't feel like doing the math, I did it. That's 7.4 grams, okay? Grand scheme of things, probably not a ton, but when it comes down to it, all this stuff adds up, right? So that's why I just like to look and know and kind of go from there. So anyway, 7.5 grams for changing out 16 nuts, and I've still got, obviously you can see a bunch of nuts there and everything. So step G1N, I use 7 nuts. So in these, I do actually use aluminum. As I mentioned, I use steel nuts I keep those in for my my wing mount and for my chassis braces. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Just because of how hard I tighten those usually and everything. So I'm gonna get started. This is both the side guards, mud guards, whatever you want to call them. Sometimes these go in, they're designed to try to stay in place while you're putting it all together. Is it perfect? No. Oh, yeah, see, like that one was a tiny bit looser. So we're gonna put those 3 in place, and then I'll put this side guard on. One thing on the 2.0, this face got tilted back and brought back. Just so you know, some more information for you guys. We just on the old one on some of the super soft tires kind of grab and okay. And whoops, I grabbed the wrong screw. Grab this screw. And it would, actually pull up your body. Sometimes it could be bad enough to where it would tear your body. And that's just no fun when you've paid all that money for that. So there's those. These 3 go into nuts on this side guard. The other one goes into just plastic. That's just to save space. The nut sticks up a little bit further. I thought, do I have? I might be losing it. No, it's still same size. Okay, so this one I'm going to come around, and then we're going to put the nuts in this side too. Basically, this whole thing is putting on the mud guards. And so I take these, put them on a 1.5, get everything lined up, and then I can push them in nice and flat so I'm not ruining the hole. And I put it on backwards so the nut's facing. There we go. That one was really easy. The other thing is, oh yeah, see, that one just popped right out of there. That's no fun. So I'll have to message them about that. They're not supposed to. They're supposed to actually fit in there snug enough to hold them, but not so snug it sucks to get them in. Again, this is my Hitachi. It is on 5 still. I'm going to go to this one next just because it did fall out super easy. No, I've got no special order which way I put these in. I usually just put the center one in first just because I'm holding it close to that. But those aluminum nuts, just so you guys know, those were TLR. Oh no, that's the washer set. The aluminum lock nuts are TLR 336005. You get a 10-pack of them for the flanged ones, for what it's worth. So that is that entire step. And then this is also just like the last step. So you've got an N and an E. So that was G1N. Obviously, you use the mud guards from the other side for E. And then now we are going to put in the center diff. Okay, so I want to talk to you guys about a couple things. So for the center diff brace, this aluminum plate is what comes in the kit. So you've got the 4 screws that go under the diff and the 2 extra screws. These are tuning options. So you can put just the 4 screws in. You can put the 4 screws plus this one, the 4 screws plus this one, or the 4 screws plus both, or the 4 screws plus none. And this plate, the aluminum plate, and we have an optional carbon fiber plate, and this is the chassis rib brace carbon for the 8X 2.0, is TLR 341027. Okay. Yeah, and then on top of that, included in the optional stuff, is it in the bag? It is in the bag. Down here in this bag, I don't know why it's in this bag, but it is also this, which is just a composite spacer. So it's a plastic spacer. So in the kit, you get both that composite spacer and the aluminum chassis rib. The only one that you would have to purchase if you wanted is this carbon fiber one. The track's really, really bumpy. We put this in. A lot of the time we run this one in the US. Like Dakota runs this. He doesn't run either of these screws, but he still runs the carbon fiber one. I run the carbon fiber one with the front screw in, so it makes the front end a little stiffer. Some people run it with both, or some people prefer this one with no screws. I have yet to see anybody prefer this one with both screws or either screw. So if you're going to put the aluminum one in, like if you're on super high grip, I'd put the aluminum one in, but I'd probably start without either screw on the front and rear. But kind of up to you. So I'm going to put the carbon fiber one in because that's what we've all been running. And it goes in there, and then I am going to put it in. I am going to put my front screw in, which means I need another nut. I only need one. I'm only going to put one in. And to be honest, I like putting the one screw in just because it keeps the brace in place. Right, so obviously I'm not going to tighten that fully yet. Let me put the center diff in. Right, so that just goes in there. I've got the front screw in. I'm not going to use the rear screw. I did use an aluminum nut on this. I'm going to grab my center diff assembly, which comes in here. And now I am going to put in the lower screws. Okay, these lower screws are solid. Okay, I put it on 10, I put it on low. And these 4 screws, I always just put a touch of black grease. You don't want a ton because you don't want it to essentially plug up the hole. Right, so I just put a tiny bit of grease in each of those. Just makes it nicer for your screw gun. And then we got the screws, 2.5, and I will go ahead and I will start these. So I started a front one, I started a back one. Now I can just send the next one in. And it's a little cattywampus. It'll all pull down. It's for me. Oh, bollocks. Why is really cattywampus then. Let's get this all. There it goes. Now it's happier. Oops. Right, now it goes in just fine. Yeah, it was all just kind of askew. So I can tell you, if I wouldn't have put the grease in there, even on this setting, it usually all stops. So anyway, now I can go back. That's still spinning fine. And I can finish tightening these. These you want tight, all the way tight, snugged up. Will the center diff mount work in truggy? You know, Vinny, it's a good question. The bolt pattern's the same. You would obviously use the composite spacer. I haven't tried it, but I saw somebody at least install it in one. I don't know if it worked online, but until I actually try it, I'm not going to say that I did it. So there's that. So now I'm going to go back and finish tightening this other screw, my front brace screw. Okay. So there we go. So now it's all in there. Everything spins well. Plenty of clearance here, so you're not going to flame from hitting that. And that is step G2N. Now step G3N is the servo here. So we're going to take, there's always all this fun stuff hidden in there. Set that off to the side. We're going to put the servo in here. So where did I put it? Is it still out? There it is. 6290. Okay. Goes in, goes this way. What I do, you can see the 6290 has a removable connector, so it's a little bit bigger than the space in there. And the way that molding works, we can't just make that bigger, and because the mold doesn't flow around that. Most of them don't have a connector like that. But what I do is I go in and I mark the center of this connector. Right? So mark the center of the connector. I'm going to push this out. Grab my trusty reamer. I don't know if you guys have noticed, I use this a lot. And I'm going to get up in here in the center. And you got to kind of start a little slower since you're just kind of grabbing each side. So I'm going to, so you can see I'm kind of going both ways to make the hole straight as well. Obviously, you don't want to go super crazy because you still want posts there. And that does hold in your servo and all. So but you can see it doesn't take long. Made a nice circle there because that's what I want. Because if you look at this, right, for the Spectrum, let's cut this out of here so you guys can see. Not everybody uses Spectrum servos. Most servos you can just turn sideways and slide right in there. I've got a little round connector that goes in to there. I'm actually going to get rid of this little, well, yeah, I don't really need it. If I was going to run in like Europe or something where they run in the rain, I probably would leave that there. But anyway, so now should be able to get my servo in there, right? Servo's in. If you look at the connector area right there, and then and just plug it right in, right? So now if I ever have a problem, I got to get up to the tab, but the tab's on the bottom. I can just push on the tab, pull this wire out, and I'm good to go. So now I'm going to put the screws in. Right, I'm going to use those other funky screws again. Give them these panhead screws instead of the other screws and washers. Sorry guys, I'm trying to go as fast as I can. So now again, I'm going to turn it back to 5, turn it back to high, and I'm going to start all of these. All right, so now I'll just run all these in. Okay, and then we'll tighten them up. You know, I kind of wish they were a different color, but they look clean. Maybe titanium ones would be bitching. But yeah, servos in, wires hanging out here. The other thing I'm going to do while I'm here is I'm going to make this bigger, because I put this side, the bigger side, in this hole, and you can see it doesn't go in there. So while I'm here, I'm going to take and make this slot longer. Okay, so there's that. And then also, so this is the way everything goes in. This will be going back to the receiver box. My receiver pack, which I'm going to put in here right now, is this ProTech 1600. This little bad boy here. It's really light. That's why I like it. And I've run a whole day. I've run a 30-minute main, a 60-minute main, 60-minute main, and I have to put like 600 milliamps back in this thing these days. So it's PTK 5198 1600 milliamp pack. I usually put it in this way, and then this I actually put coming out of here. So I am actually going to make a slot right here as well. And I'm going to go kind of slow. I don't usually want it to go all the way to the bottom. Because I just need enough for these 3 wires to come out of here, because I actually charge through that. So, right, some people are going to use a Dremel, some people are going to use different things. That's fine. But yeah, so I go like this. This stays in here. I mean, you can go this way too. It doesn't really matter. But it goes like that in there, and then this will be hanging out right here, and then the switch will come inside here. Okay, so, and then this will stay inside here. So this will be plugged inside the box. You'll see me when I do put this in, once this is in there, I'll double side tape this in place and actually use some foam on the other side. So for now, that's my box. That's my servo in there, which was actually step G3N. And then the next step, G4N, is actually putting this box in the car. So that means I can do the next part. Okay, so now here's my box in the car. So this, right off the bat, is going to want to come around here like this, right? So you can see it here. It's going to come around underneath and go through. So I want to make sure the wire is nice and straight, and it's going to go in there like so for now. And then I will clean the rest of it up and then grab 4 of these M3x10 flatheads. Again, it's on the same thing on 5, on high. Line that up, get 1 screw started. All right, so now this, oops, probably should have done that already. Oops, back this one side out of it. Sorry, I forgot to get the servo wire also comes down and around here, so I need it underneath that there, and I don't want to crimp it a bunch to get it under there. It is protected pretty well. The Spectrum cables that come with these servos have like a sheath around them almost. So you can see as you're putting it together, if you get your wires in there, you know, by the time you get all of that in there, you're done. You're not, oh, let me go back and rewire this thing. So now I got this wire in here. This wire is coming around really good. That'll go a little bit more, like so. Perfect. Because I actually run it backwards underneath this, the little holder and around. So that'll be good there. Let's tuck that into there. And then this will go on the other side of it, over yonder. Bam, that'll be awesome. So the next step, let's keep building here. G4N, G5N is the receiver box. All right, so I use a Spectrum SR515 receiver. The 515 has a little bit shorter antenna on it, and it's also got 5 ports, which I really like. So let's get the receiver box. Receiver box is going to go back here. Obviously, I also want a bigger hole here because I'm going to be running a bunch of wires in there. So to me, I'd rather just see, again, some of this stuff, it's just personal preference. I don't need to make this any bigger, but it's easier, so why not? And I forgot to put the wire, good job, Ryan, into the servo for the throttle servo. Other box, which would be helpful because we're going to need that. So, see you guys, I got going too fast. Here's the servo wire for the throttle, and I don't foresee that. So we are going, this is just 4 screws to get out of the way. That is a nice thing about using a power driver. In the past, it would have been like, and you'd spend an hour trying to fish that into the hole rather than, 20 minutes to get these screws out. So just move this out of the way real quick. No big deal. Put the wire in. Okay. Okay. That's in. So now we will get all the rest of this back in. What an idiot. See, it happens, guys. Not the end of the world. Put this first screw in, and then I'll make sure all the wires are where they need to be again. All right, so now, hey, I got 2 wires. Go figure. Much better. All right, so there's that. That's plenty of room. I like that. And then throttle wire is going to come back here, and my servo wire is going to come back here. Everything's underneath there. All right, good to go. So let me put the other 3 screws back in. and then we'll continue on. And let's see here. Will the center diff mount work in the truggy? That one is your intro video. You mentioned most of you guys aren't using any plates. When I tried, well, no, I don't understand that. Using any. No, we always have some brace under there. So you either run, at a minimum, you have to run this because it has to be spaced up. So at a minimum, you have to run the composite spacer. And a lot of people do run that. Like Barry prefers that one. So I'm currently running box setup, but my rear is fishtailing a lot. Omar will answer that in a minute. Let me get through this. I'll get the receiver box in here, and then you guys can see the rest. So receiver box is going to be, first things first, receiver box goes in this way. I'm going to actually put my receiver in here. I do double side tape my receiver in place, guys. Not everybody does that. Some people feel, oh, there's vibration, there's impact, there's all this stuff. If you're not going to double side tape it in, at a minimum, make sure it's well wrapped in foam. I do put 2 layers of double-sided tape to help with the vibration some. Does it make it perfect? No. Have I ever lost a receiver? Yes. Has everybody lost a receiver? Yes. So let me get this in the box here. I always put this back here. It goes against the side there, but it goes about like so. You'll see that way all this area, there's enough room for all these to stick up. And then this is going to go down and up here. So that's always the first thing I do, because otherwise I forget. So that'll just kind of hang out for a bit. So now my first order of business is to feed all of this stuff in here. So I'll feed that in there. Next will be my throttle wire. And I'll show you what I do to kind of clean them up some. And then okay, so let me put these 3 little itty bitty screws in, these little flat heads here, and then I will make all the wire look better. So one, it's not fully tight. You didn't hear the clutch at all, so that way I can get these in there. Okay, so now got all these wires. This one's good. So I like this to go. This goes here. And we'll go backwards. Yep, that's okay. Come around there. I don't know if you guys can see, but I like my throttle wire to be my second wire in line, so to speak. And when I mean in line, I mean just kind of right here. That's this one. And when I say in line, I mean all tucked in under that plate that we have, the wire loom guide thing that we give you. And then there's that one. So you can see they're all nice and neat there. So now I'm gonna start trying to put this thing in place. Okay, so when I say trying, oftentimes this takes me a couple tries, but especially with new wires and new servos and new everything. Okay, Okay, so that one's started. All of those are around. And this one's definitely trickier because of the switch location. So normally I have to just kind of, really helps to have the electric driver for that. And I'm just running them in until they get taut. I'm not trying to go crazy or anything like that. Make sure everything's out of the way. Nothing's anywhere near the spur gear. Nope. And now I've got all these wires up here. Everything on the outside is nice and clean. Now, this is my switch. So I'm going to plug that in. Get that done. Maybe. Okay, that's plugged in, out of the way. So now I've got two wires sticking out of here. Well, I use two of the same brand servo and the leads are exactly the same length. So what that means is the long one is always the closer one. Well, my closer one's my throttle servo, right? So this is always the throttle. The longer of the two is the throttle. Another thing I do is because I just don't like all of the excess of everything here. Now you got to be careful when doing this. You obviously don't want to cut any wire, but the sheathing, I don't need a bunch of excess of that. I want it to come all the way into the box. But so I'm going to go to about there, where you can see there's still plenty in there. And I'm just going to get rid of this sheathing because it just makes the box cleaner and it's just extra weight for what I feel is nothing. When it's in the box, I mean, the box is protecting everything, but you just put a snip in it, peel it back a little bit, get the three wires out of the way, cut off the excess, done. So now I can plug these two in. Again, the throttle is the long one, the steering will be the shorter of the two. So for me, on the Spectrum stuff, they're actually labeled steering, throttle, aux 1, blah, blah, blah. Not all of them are labeled like that. Some just say channel 1, channel 2, channel whatever. Your channel 1's always going to be steering, channel 2's always going to be throttle. But anyway, so there's my receiver box. I'm not actually going to close that up. It's not really on a step here, but again, it's in here. So if I pull out this little bag here, I'm going to dump that out. And then this little bag, I'm going to cut this open. I'm going to steal these two little itty bitty screws and this plate and put all this right back in here in my option stuff. So this is one of those tips you pretty much only learn from being on here. This is your plate that now I can go in and cover that up so that's not a big open dust entering hole. So I just get these screws, these two little itty bitty screws, right? Do you have to do that? No, to be honest, we ran the old one for ages without this covered up, but it sure is prettier. But again, if you run a mechanical switch or a switch that screws into the back, you know, we give you that as an option, but now you can see it's a nice closed box. And I can put that cover on. Now, I normally have my transponder goes in this box for me. So my transponder will actually be attached to the top right here. And then I'll put it in. That way my transponder is always out of the way when I pull my receiver box off. But for now, we'll put this together. Okay, and then I usually flip this in like that. Now my antenna wire has to go into, where did I put it? The manuals bag. Really? Right. Here we go. So the manuals bag actually has a full antenna tube in there. Obviously, as you can see, I'm going to not need the whole thing. And the other thing is, with all these current receivers, you don't fold this clear section over and put this tube on, guys. Don't ever do that. That'll basically render your receiver useless. So I'm going to go like this. I also don't want to cut it, so I want it just above that. So it's as short as can be. Bam, I've got a bunch of extra antenna tube. Slide this on. Push it down into the hole. Then there's a little set screw here. Grab a 1.5. Stick that in the side here. That just keeps the antenna tube in place. And you just get the set screw down until it's flush with the top of that holder. See it, maybe see it, I don't know, probably not there. Okay, so that's all that stuff. Now I'm going to put my receiver battery in. Okay, so I put double-sided tape on the downside because I charge mine in the car. Again, not for everybody. But I'm just showing you what I do. So I put this in. This is going to be in like this. And there's going to be plenty of room to plug all this in on the side, right? And then on the top here, I will actually go back and put the foam that's the inside of these in. So for what it's worth, it's what I do. You don't have to. If you often change receiver packs and everything, then, you know, I wouldn't recommend this. But there's that. Just keeps everything from flopping around a bunch. That goes in there. And then I will go back and put that in there, but obviously I'm not to the step where I put the put these in. So you can see. So basically I've got it in there. That camera sucks. I've got the wires routed in there, and that the balance lead's coming out. I charge through the balance lead with my charger, and then put this in. You can see the top here, it's really loose right now, so it's not putting any pressure on that little tiny battery pack. So that's the other reason you'll see me go in and put the foam in. But that will be a little later on, and I'll show you guys that too. So that is G5N. That was G6N, G7N, might be everything. G8N, G9N. Oh, the tank. I forget the tank's in here. So there's a bunch of extra stuff here. Reinforced bladders. If you want to either heighten or lower your servo, there's 1mm ones there. There's some red thread lock in here. This stuff, it really, really holds. I would be cautious with that. I mean, when I say really, really holds, I mean it really, really holds. Okay, now we got the tank. Got some line here. Let's go ahead and get this installed. And then that'll be, we don't need that because we didn't use a regular cover. So that'll be the end of it here. So we got two of these. The little rubber grommets and everything already in there. This I'm just going to pull. So the very first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take my tank and I'm going to pull the lid open, and in there's this thing that floats around, a filter. I'm going to make sure that when I pull it open and I let go, it doesn't get stuck like that. So it got stuck a tiny bit. So I'm just going to ever so slightly pull on the tube to pull it forward some. And I'm going to do that. And there we go. So now when the car flips over, the purpose of that, it's called a clunk, it's supposed to drop to the bottom, so it's pulling fuel from here, right? If it gets stuck halfway through and you're halfway through a race, you're not going to pull any fuel, guys. So first thing you always do is check the clunk in a tank. The next thing I'm going to do is inside there is a thick, oh man. It's called a tank insert. Oh yeah, it's right there. Come on. Oh, they're gonna be a bugger. And this is, sometimes this stuff can be easier when it's in the car because you can grab it different and whatnot. This thing's gonna like fly away. Highly testing the springs out in this. So this thing, it's called a tank insert. Okay, the purpose of this is just to take up room in your tank. This tank, every time we've measured it without this whole insert in, it's been like 124.5. So you're allowed 125 cc's in here. So I'm going to take it out, and then if I need to, I'm going to add some in. So you can cut this to different lengths or even just add the screw back in, things like that to take up room. So that's what I'm going to do. Okay, so then the next thing we're going to do, I always put these on the chassis first. That way I can get everything else situated. Excuse me. So there's two different ones. One's just like this, and one's got this extra thing. And if you look in the manual, you're going to see the one with the extra hole goes over here. And as long as you have the other pin inserted, this isn't going to spin or anything. Okay, so that post is in, and this one's got, it's pinned or keyed as well. So you should be good there too. And then I usually kind of start this one a tiny bit, and then I'll twist it, get the key in place, and then I'll finish tightening it. Okay, so now both my posts are in there. Now, if you look at the tank, there's this nipple thing here, and then there's a nipple on the bottom. So your goal is to get this on here, which is really fun, and then get this side down there. Well, this, as you can see, sits down past the tank, so it's too long. So the purpose of this is I want to show you, you kind of do this number, and then you're going to cut this off, so that it's about the level of this part of the tank. And what this is where your fuel runs. So you can see about the same level, maybe you can't see because it's all white and clear. Here, about the same level. And then this is all going to go in place as you try to get that around that bottom part, which can take some patience. But as long as you get that fuel tubing on there, okay, then what happens is when extra fuel goes up here, it goes down and exits out the bottom of the chassis and doesn't annihilate your chassis a bunch. Okay, there we go. So now both those are in. So what this little L thing is, people ask me all the time what this is. This is for IFMAR racing. IFMAR requires you to have a 90-degree fitting at the end of your tank. So it does take away power. It robs about 10% of power. So unless you're really wanting to run this, I wouldn't bother with it. I've never put it in, but I also don't ever race those types of races. So now we're going to take, and the front just gets the screw with the washer. And this, you want to just tighten it down just till it's taut. Okay, so I run it down enough and then I finish it. Yeah, that's taut because the tank's on rubber grommets, right? So the tank will move around a tiny bit. This side gets this. It's for holding fuel line. Goes in like so. And it actually makes it really nice to hold the screw. And then I basically will tighten this until that thing doesn't really move very easy, but can still move a little. Okay, so that's pretty good. So these two lines, this line will be your pickup, which will go to your carburetor, and then this line will be your exhaust. And we'll run those when we put the engine in, but for now. So this one, since I'm putting it on here, I'm actually going to show you guys in this video. So I take just a little bit, and we don't want it to fly away, but we also don't want to cut our fingers. And I make a little, essentially, O-ring, slide it over these. But, oh, there we go. Yep, that happens sometimes too. That's fun. So we'll make another one. This is plenty long to do this a few times. Plus, I didn't really need to do it that far, but that one flew away. That's different. The other one broke. Okay, and then I'm going to stick the fuel line in here. There we go. And pull that out. Okay, see that? We're going to pull it down a little bit more. Not all the way to the end, but just so about like so. And then we're going to put that over. So what it does is essentially it's like a double grab on this. So it just makes it seal really good and stay in place really well. But you just, so you can see, you want to just get it kind of past between the flange of the nipple and sitting into that flat spot. And then this will actually go to the pipe. But for now, I just kind of put them both in there to hold them. And that is step G. So, oh my gosh, 30 minutes and we will start on the next bag. Let me see if there's any, okay, so Omar, so on the separate setup sheet, can you tell me what rear toe is at? 3 degrees. People are really stuck on the numbers in the back for some reason. I'm not really sure why people get so stuck on the number itself. But for what it's worth, again, the rear pills, when they're center dots, are 3 degrees of toe and 1 degree anti-squat. Omar, for you, I probably would recommend more of, more along the lines of what I run. So I run 1 degree. So the manual uses half down, half in on the C block. I would go 1 down, half in, so a little less anti-squat. The other thing I would do is probably go to like a HB-White rear spring, since our option springs aren't out yet, and honestly, they might not be here for like 30 days or so. I would also go to a like our silver front spring or an HB Gold front spring. Also make sure your front shocks are on the bottom or on the outside. So those are kind of the things. Shocks on the bottom, on the outside, on the front. In the rear, I'd drop your pill down, so go 1 down, half in, so your C and D essentially match. And I'd try that. Should take care of that. Yeah. So I don't see any other questions here to answer. Let me show the so on the e-buggy side of things. We wanted to see the straps. So for me, this is the new e-buggy side tray / mudguard. So it's kind of a 2-in-1. And then you've got the straps, which are like so. Okay. I always have run my buckle to the inside, right? So the first thing you're going to do is, let's see, this comes up and goes around. Okay, yeah. So the first thing you're going to do is, here's your mud guard, is you're going to take and you're going to put this up through the inside of the mud guard, right? And the way I'm putting it, the hook part is facing in, right? So when I bring it up, I've got this loop that's on the outside, right? So this is then going to go down into this side, around, bring it up, it's all stuck together, right? So now it's like this. So now I've got the hoop, and this comes down, around, and we'll just wrap around and grab a battery pack. So that's how I do it. The hardest part is always figuring out which way it goes in the hole first. So hook section, when I say hook, the hook of Velcro. So this side with the teeth, the grabby side, in, going up through the inside. Up, down, around, through the loop, and then it holds. Okay, somebody had asked to see that, so just wanted to show you guys, because I said I would at the end. And other than that, I am going to stop this broadcast so I can get a drink and whatnot, and then we'll go from there. Have a good night. If you're not going to join me in the next one, guys, take care.